filler. You need an inert filler. What I'm using here is chalk, calcium carbonate, and you can use slate plaster. You can use talcum if you really wish to, but it has to be inert, something that's not going to react with any of your other things. So I've just put some dried chalk on my board, and I'm going to add a little bit of water to it. And mix it up. So this will allow me to start grinding it down. To a nice smooth consistency. If you don't have a smooth consistency, you get little bumps showing up in your gold. You really don't want that. You want something to look very fine and smooth and even. So it looks like you dropped gold right on the page. Seems to be a pretty good consistency. I just take my muller, it's a glass muller, over top of a marble slab, and start grinding it down. This is already pretty smooth. Feel that. I just won't take any large pieces that you have on there out. You can probably hear I'm not getting a very loud grinding noise at all, so it's telling me that this chalk is actually pretty smooth right now, which is nice. I'm still going to make sure that everything is smooth and fine, and no large particles left in this whatsoever. As well, you can use a palette knife, some sort of scraper, mix it back up into the middle again. I'm just going to keep working that for a little while. The next part is I'm going to add my fish glue. Now I'm using fish glue from Lee Valley Tools. Now it's already in a liquid form. You can buy fish glue that's in a dry form, make it into a liquid, or you can actually mix it up just as it is here into dry. But I've got, as I said, liquid, and I'm going to add about 1/3 as much fish glue as I had calcium carbonate or chalk. So I'm just going to put that separately. That'll probably be good enough there. The great thing about fish glue is that it's hydrophilic, it attracts moisture, so when you blow on it, it gets a little bit tacky, and it helps later on in the process. So I'm just going to start mixing this up. Into my ground up chalk fairly evenly. And mostly this helps just glue the gesso to the page and glue the chalk pieces together. Alright, so I'm going to give it a bit of a grind again, and we'll just work this for a little while, and hopefully it'll dry down just a little bit in the process. Just spread it out and keep grinding it in. It's gotten much more tacky at this point. We've ground in the fish glue and scraped it all up and let it dry just a little bit onto our mulling board. Now what I'm using is just a marble tile from Home Depot. It cost me about $7. It's a nice flat surface, extremely flat surface actually on the finished side. It's not very porous, and it gives you a really excellent grinding surface that's very large and allows you to work quite a bit of material. So the next part here is we're going to add a little bit of red bole. Red bole is just a type of clay that's got a bit of a red pigment to it. It's a very soft and generally very fine clay. It's often called Armenian Bole because originally it came from Armenia. And all we're going to use this for is to tint our gesso just a little bit. You can tint it as much as you really want to, but we're going to tint it a little bit so that it's easier to tell where we're putting it on the page. So I'm just going to add, not very much at all, a small pile, and then I'm going to start mixing it up. And again, we're going to have to grind this in. You can see it's already started to turn the mixture, sort of a brownish red, which is the color we're looking for. It's almost a skin-like tone, really. A lot of period recipes call for Armenian Bole and for lead white. I don't use lead white. Some people say it makes the gesso softer. I just say it makes it more dangerous. Really, I don't think it needs to be any more white. I think that's exactly what it's being used for, is pigmentation. So, we've got it mixed in with our knife. Clean it off a little bit. And again, we start grinding it in. Yeah, just a quick note on actually mulling and how it should feel. As you can hear, there's almost no noise coming off this whatsoever. There's a little bit of a stickiness to the muller. It's because there's no air in between it. As you're mulling, just moving in circles around and spreading it down, you should feel no grittiness. It should be almost absolutely smooth. And that's what we're looking for in consistency, because any sort of grittiness is going to show up in your gold. Now the next step is to actually add some stickiness. And what I use for this, some people use honey, some recipes call for honey, but white sugar, just granulated white sugar works just fine. The great thing about the sugar is, again, it's very hydrophilic. When you blow on it or use your breath on it, later on in the process when you're gilding, it picks up the water immediately and makes the surface of the gesso extremely sticky. So we've already had about 10 parts of calcium carbonate, our inert filler. We've had about 3 parts of fish glue. In this case, I've used the wet fish glue. A little bit of Armenian Bole. The next step is to add some white sugar, and we're going to add about. Most recipes call for 1 part white sugar. I'll put in 2 parts just to make sure that it's nice and sticky. So approximately 1/5 the amount, right, to 1/3 the amount, and we just add it in. And the water in the gesso right now will start dissolving it, and we can start mixing it in again with muller until it's completely smooth. Okay, at this point I like to add in 3 more kind of minor ingredients, really. First thing I'll add is a little bit of gum arabic, and this helps the glair stay together. And what I'm using is just gum arabic from the art store. This one's already pre-mixed. It's just a Winsor & Newton Phoenix pre-mixed watercolor gum arabic. So I'll add a couple of drops. I find this helps with the consistency. It helps the the gesso stay together. And I'm going to add 2 more really sticky ingredients at this time. Just a drop or 2. This is egg Glair. You can make this yourself at home. Just whip up a couple eggs, let it sit for a while, and you take the liquid remaining in the bottom and you've got Glair. This again adds to the stickiness. It's a very sticky substance. It smells horrible, but it works very well. Put that back together. And again, one more sticky ingredient. You can never have gesso too sticky. Is a bit of garlic Glair. Right, this is just garlic juice. This one I got from the Berend Guild. You can make it yourself by pressing the garlic. Just a drop, maybe a couple of drops. And then we just mix this in again and let it dry out for a little while. Okay, I've just given it a bit of a final mulling. As you can see, I've got it spread all over my mulling board. what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to let it dry out a little bit. I've got a lot of moisture in here, so it's not very useful at this point. What we want it to do is let it dry down, and eventually what I'll do is I'll put it on in small containers, or I will put it on wax paper to dry into little pastilles that you can rehydrate and use later. Okay, I've let some of my gesso dry out on wax paper. You can also use aluminum foil, any sort of non-absorbent, non-sticky surface. Wax paper is generally best. So you can come up with little pellets of gesso. This one's not quite dry yet, but if I leave it up for another day or so, it should be dry. I've also saved some of the wetter gesso in a container. See, it's a little bit drier than when it was mixed, but this is what I'm going to use. So you can either put this in a small, one of these tablets in a small container, add just a little tiny bit of water, mix it up, and then start laying in your gesso, or you can work from the wet like I'm going to do right now. All you need for this is, of course, your gesso, your Illumination, which you can see I've got a very rough layout on the page, so that I know where I'm going to lay in the gesso, and of course your gesso and a brush. So here it goes. We mix up the gesso a little bit, try not to wreck our brush. Pull up a fairly good drop of it on the brush. Just a little bit too much. And then put it in the middle of in the middle of an area. Just dropped on, like so. Add a little bit more, and then we can start drawing it out with the brush. And you draw it up to your lines and out from the middle. Filling up the area where you want gold to be. If you blob, it actually looks like a drop that tapers down towards the edges. Get a little bit more gesso on there. Now you can do this in a couple of layers, which is generally better. It all depends on how much of a bead you want your gold to be in. If you want a very high three-dimensional effect, you have to add more gesso, and you're better off to do it in a couple of layers. You're going to need the gesso to dry between applying the layers at least a day. At least a day. Sometimes it'll take 2, depends on how humid it is. It'll take up to a week before you can actually lay the gold on. The gesso layer has to be solid before you put the gold on. You can see, again, I've just dropped some on the page. I'm just drawing it out with my brush towards my lines. Now if you go over your lines, I wouldn't panic too much. You can always take a knife to it later and scrape it out. For this next part, you're going to need a couple of tools. You're going to need a clean paintbrush, just small, fairly stiff bristles. This is a stiffer paintbrush. This is actually just a kid's brush, but the bristles are nice and stiff, but still soft. You're going to need gold leaf, a knife, burnisher. Now my gold leaf is laid out on a pad that just has a bit of suede glued to the top of it, and this is where I'm going to look from, where I'm going to cut my gold from. Okay, I've got my gold on the pad, the gilder's pad, and I'm going to start picking up pieces of the gold, but in order to do that I have to cut small pieces off of it, and all you do is just run your knife along the gold. This one's actually tearing a little bit. There's the piece I'm going to pick up. You take your soft brush, rub it into your hair, a bit of static, piece on your brush. Now that your work has actually dried for a couple of days, the gesso is nice and solid underneath. It's very dry. So what we want to do is introduce moisture again, but we're going to do that by breathing on it. Some people use a tube or a straw. I just lean down and breathe right on it. I've still got the gold in my hand, ready to be applied to the gesso. So I'm just going to breathe on my work, get a little bit of moisture on the top layer, and then apply the gold. It just goes like this. That's the first piece. Now we just continue on exactly like that until we've got everything covered. I've just finished laying the last piece of gold. It's all basically stuck to the page, and what we're going to start now is burnishing. For that, what we need is a burnisher. This is a dog tooth burnisher. Kind of looks like a dog tooth on the end, made out of agate, very highly polished. You can use any other type of burnisher, really, as long as it's very, very smooth. And you need a piece of glassine paper. You can find this in art stores just about anywhere. And all you do is lay your glassine down on top of your gilded piece and start pressing it in with the burnisher. Little circles all around it. And this should hopefully press all the last bits of gold into the gesso. And make sure everything is nice and smooth. Just finishing up burnishing, and the next step is actually to take off some more of the excess gold, because it always sticks places where you don't want it. So I take that soft brush I was talking about and just start moving it around the page in little circles, and it helps get whatever loose pieces of gold are still stuck on there, and maybe stuck in the little lines that you want. That's about it, I think. Now, if there's any bits that have gone where you don't want them to, you can just take a knife and scrape them off. Okay, and this is what the piece looks like after the gold's been laid in. You're all ready to start painting. If there's any, there might be small minor repairs which I can use gold paint on. But at this point, you don't want to add any more gold because it's going to stick to the paint. So you're pretty well done. This has to be done before any paint goes on. And that's about it. That's the process.